He married her to save his empire, but she made him question everything he thought he knew about power, pride, and love. When billionaire Julian Thorne agreed to a marriage of convenience with Camila Wright, the plain, bookish niece of a powerful business family, he thought he was making a calculated business move. 1 year, one woman, one contract. He could endure anything for 12 months if it meant saving the empire he'd spent his whole life building. What he didn't know was that Camilla had no intention of staying plain and quiet. She had a plan of her own. And by the time Julian realized who she really was, it was too late. Because she wasn't just here to save his company. She was here to teach him what real worth looks like. This isn't just a love story. It's a story about masked illusions, and the day a powerful man got humbled by the woman he thought was beneath him. And it all started on a rainy Tuesday morning in Manhattan. Julian Thorne stood in his penthouse office staring at the city he once ruled, unaware that the woman who would change everything had just landed at JFK. Julian Thorne was the kind of man who didn't just walk into a room, he commanded it. At 38, he was one of New York's most eligible billionaires. Private jets, custom suits, the kind of smirk that came from knowing every woman in the room wanted him, and every man secretly wished to be him. But behind that smirk was a crumbling empire. Thorne Enterprises, built from the ground up, was bleeding cash. Failed mergers, bad press, and a string of lawsuits had shaken investor confidence. And now, with just months before insolvency, Julian found himself trapped in a deal he didn't want but couldn't afford to refuse. A marriage, said George, his longtime attorney, to Camila Wright, the niece of the Wright family. Harvard-educated, quiet, no scandals, and apparently she reads more books than she speaks words. Julian blinked. Plain, awkward, and allergic to parties, what a dream. George didn't laugh. She's their condition, Julian. No Camilla, no merger, no company. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Boston, Camila Wright closed a worn copy of The Art of War, her expression unreadable. She hadn't asked for this arrangement either, but when her aunt matriarch of the Wright family called her in, she didn't argue. Not because she was weak, but because she knew this was her moment. People had underestimated Camilla her whole life, called her invisible, too serious, not wife material. Let them. Let Julian Thorne think she was just a bookworm in glasses, because sometimes invisibility is the perfect disguise. And what no one knew, not even her aunt, was that Camilla had her own reasons for agreeing to this marriage, reasons that had nothing to do with love, and everything to do with reclaiming the legacy her parents lost, at the hands of men just like Julian Thorne. The deal was signed. The wedding was set. And Julian. He had no idea the woman walking into his life would be the very one to dismantle his ego, piece by piece. And it all began with their first meeting, where Julian would learn his first lesson about the danger of judging a woman by her appearance. Julian adjusted his cufflinks as he stepped into the Wright family's stately Manhattan townhouse. Gilded frames, oil paintings, and the subtle scent of old money wrapped around the room like perfume. He wasn't nervous, of course not. This was just another transaction. Mrs. Elenina Wright sat with perfect posture, her pearls gleaming in the afternoon light. "Camilla will be down shortly," she said. "But I should warn you, she's not like the women you're used to." Julian gave a polite smile. He dated models, heiresses, even a pop star or two. How bad could this be? Then came the footsteps. Camilla descended the staircase slowly, wearing a shapeless brown sweater and a long, outdated skirt. Her hair was yanked into a tight bun, and thick-rimmed glasses dominated her face. She looked more like a librarian from a dusty archive than the future Mrs. Thorne. Julian's smile faltered. "Mr. Thorne," she said quietly, voice clear and steady. "Let's not waste time pretending this is anything more than business." Julian blinked. I appreciate your honesty." "I doubt that," Camilla replied flatly, placing a manila folder on the coffee table. "These are the preliminary terms. I've reviewed them all. The merger works, so does the contract." She wasn't shy. She wasn't even awkward. She was precise, cold, almost surgical. And she didn't flirt, not once. For Julian, that was unsettling. Most women tried to charm him. Camila seemed indifferent, like she'd already seen through him, and wasn't impressed. When he asked how long the marriage needed to last, she didn't blink. 1 year. After that, you can return to your models, your parties, your illusions. Until then, we pretend. The date was set. The wedding would take place at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a lavish public affair. But behind the scenes, Camilla remained absent from most preparations. No fittings, no brunches, no media teasers. She's busy, Ella Lenena would say, with her nonprofit. Julian rolled his eyes. In his world, appearances were everything. But Camilla, she didn't seem to care how she looked. And that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. The wedding day arrived with photographers flashing, whispers swirling, and Julian fully prepared to grit his teeth through a fake smile. But what he didn't know was that Camilla was preparing for a performance of her own. The wedding was beautiful, at least that's what the tabloids said. St. Patrick's Cathedral was filled with New York's elite, dressed in designer labels and dripping in judgment. The whispers began the moment Camilla entered, still in her thick glasses and shapeless gown. She didn't even try, someone murmured. She's not even pretty, another sneered. Poor Julian. What a waste. He heard them all, and for once Julian didn't know how to spin it. He didn't even try to hide his discomfort as he kissed his bride. The photos would later be described as tense, awkward, emotionless. Camilla sat through the reception silently, barely touching her food, answering questions with polite one-word responses. She didn't engage, she didn't entertain, and Julian drank. He told himself it was just business. 1 year, one contract, he could survive this. What he didn't see, what no one saw, was Camilla that night alone in a suite at the Plaza Hotel, removing her glasses and unpinning her hair. She stood before the mirror, letting waves of glossy dark curls fall over her shoulders. Her eyes, once hidden, now stared back with quiet fire. The performance was nearly over. She picked up a slim leather-bound folder from her bag and reviewed the legal documents one last time. Every clause, every signature, every condition. Julian thought this marriage gave him access to the Wright family fortune. But Camilla, she was the fortune. She was the silent majority shareholder, the one who held the final say, the one who could save or end his empire with a single vote. And yet, she had said yes, not to destroy him, but to test him, to see if there was anything in him worth saving. She knew the pain of being overlooked, of being told, "You're smart, but not beautiful enough, good-hearted, but not desirable." She had lived her whole life in the shadows of men who only saw surfaces. Now she was done hiding. And as the morning sun rose over Manhattan, Julian Thorne woke up next to a stranger, unaware that the woman he'd just married would soon take his world apart, and maybe piece by piece teach him how to rebuild it. Julian was used to being in control. Meetings, mergers, media. But in the days following the wedding, he found himself strangely sidelined. Camilla took charge quietly, efficiently, without fanfare. She moved into his penthouse and turned the guest bedroom into her office. She rearranged meetings with the board. She began reviewing internal operations he'd long neglected. At first, Julian chalked it up to her being thorough, but then she started asking questions, real questions about personnel, community programs, employee turnover. "She wants to visit our job training partners," he asked his assistant. Why? No one had an answer, so Julian followed her. What he saw shook him. Camilla wasn't touring boardrooms or shaking hands with investors. She was standing in a crowded shelter, laughing with a young mother trying to get back on her feet. She was holding a clipboard at a soup kitchen, coordinating volunteers. She was mentoring college students who reminded her of who she used to be. "This is where our entry-level talent will come from," she said calmly when Julian confronted her. "From shelters," he scoffed. "From survivors," Camilla corrected. "From people who've lived through what your company only pretends to support." He didn't have a response. That afternoon, she brought him to a quiet cafe in Harlem. Waiting there was his sister Rachel. He hadn't seen her in nearly a year. "I flew her in," Camilla said simply. "She's been trying to reach you. About her medical research, about your family." Julian froze. He hadn't thought about his sister's work in ages, too busy with boardrooms and brand image. That night, after Rachel shared her breakthroughs in pediatric disease research, Julian sat in stunned silence. "How did you know?" he finally asked Camilla. Her answer was simple. "Because I've made a life out of being ignored, and I recognize when someone else is doing it too." Julian didn't say a word as they drove back home. But for the first time, he didn't look at Camilla like an obligation. He looked at her like a mirror. The Thorne Enterprises Charity Gala was the crown jewel of Julian's year, an annual spectacle where the rich flaunted their wealth under the guise of generosity. This year, Julian arrived in a tailored tuxedo, jaw clenched tight, because for the first time, he wasn't the center of attention. Camilla was. She entered the ballroom like a woman reborn. Gone were the glasses, the severe bun, the muted tones. Tonight she wore a deep burgundy gown that hugged her curves and caught the light with every step. Her curls framed her face in soft waves, and her presence turned heads for all the right reasons. Whispers followed her, but not the cruel kind. Admiring ones, curious ones. "Is that Mrs. Thorne? She's stunning." Why was she hiding before her? Julian stood frozen, drink in hand, watching as investor after investor approached her. She spoke with ease about the company's restructuring, her new hiring initiatives, and Rachel's research division. His company, her vision. "She's quite something," came a voice behind him. He turned. Victoria. Of course. Clinging to a flute of champagne and draped in diamonds, she gave him that smirk he once found irresistible. "This marriage doesn't have to change things, Jules," she purred. "We both know it's just for business." But before he could respond, a warm hand slid into his. "Camila, I believe Goldman Sachs is looking for you, Victoria," she said smoothly. "Something about that startup you claim to run." Victoria paled. As she retreated, Julian stared at his wife, really stared. "I didn't know you could fight like that," he murmured. Camilla smiled unbothered. "You never asked what I was capable of." Then, just as the orchestra began a soft waltz, Camilla leaned in. "Let them see us, Julian. Let them see this isn't a fraud." As they stepped onto the dance floor together, shoulders back, eyes forward, Julian finally realized Camilla hadn't just changed how others saw her. She had changed how he saw everything. The applause still echoed from their dance as Camilla and Julian left the gala floor, only to be met by George, Julian's longtime lawyer, face pale, lips tight. "There's a problem," he said quietly. "Victoria's outside talking to reporters. She's claiming your marriage is a sham, and she says she has proof." Julian cursed under his breath. Camilla didn't flinch. "Let her talk," she said calmly. "Julian, would you like to dance again?" "What?" "We don't run, we face it." And so, with cameras flashing, Camilla and Julian returned to the floor, hand in hand, just as Victoria burst into the ballroom, drunk, angry, beautiful in all the wrong ways. "It's all fake," she slurred. "She tricked him. She's a nobody who wanted his name." The room fell silent. Julian stepped forward, but Camilla touched his arm, stopping him. Then she walked toward Victoria, heels echoing like thunder in the stunned ballroom. "You're right about one thing," Camilla said, voice steady. "I did hide who I was. I dressed plain. I wore glasses. I made myself small to see if he could see past the surface." She turned to the room. "He failed that test. At first. Just like you are now." Victoria blinked, stunned. "But you see," Camilla continued, "real beauty, real worth, is in the choices we make. Julian is learning that. Maybe one day you will too." She turned to security. "Please escort Ms. Stone home safely." As Victoria was let out, the crowd began to murmur, not with ridicule, but respect. Julian approached, eyes filled with something new. Awe, humility, pride. "You could have humiliated her," he said softly. "Why didn't you?" "Because revenge doesn't build anything," Camilla replied, "and I came here to build." That night, as they drove home under city lights, Julian didn't say much, but deep down something inside him shifted. For the first time in his adult life, he no longer wanted to win. He wanted to be worthy. They didn't talk much that night. Back at the penthouse, Julian poured himself a glass of water, not scotch, and sat across from Camila at the kitchen island. The air between them was no longer heavy with tension, but something softer, honest, fragile. "I was going to humiliate you," she said quietly, not looking up. "That was the plan." "I know," he replied, "and I would have deserved it." Camila finally looked at him. "But you didn't fight me tonight. You didn't defend your ego. You defended me." Julian set down his glass. "I don't want to pretend anymore, Camila. I want to see you. For real." She studied him carefully. "What exactly do you see now?" He swallowed. "A woman who's 10 times smarter than I am, stronger, kinder, who's spent her whole life being overlooked, underestimated, and still chose compassion. And if I stop being perfect, if I'm messy, scarred, hard to love." Julian didn't hesitate. "Then I'll meet you there, because I'm not asking for the version of you that's polished for a ballroom." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm asking for the version of you who stood in a thrift store sweater and told me the truth from day one." Inside was a modest diamond ring. Nothing flashy, but real. "I want to do it again," he said. "Not because the contract says so, but because I say so. Because I love you." Camila's breath hitched. She looked down at the ring, then at him. "I can't have children," she whispered. "The doctors confirmed it last week. I was going to surprise you with treatments, but it's too late now." Julian reached for her hand. "I don't need perfect. I need you." That night, for the first time since their marriage began, they didn't sleep in separate rooms. They stayed on the couch, tangled in blankets, and whispered promises. And in the quiet before dawn, Camila finally let herself believe. She wasn't just wanted, she was loved. 3 weeks later, Julian stood in front of the Thorne Enterprises board, only this time not to defend his ego, but to announce something new. Effective immediately, he said, "We're launching the Wright Thorne Foundation, a division focused on medical research, workforce reintegration, and education access." He glanced at Rachel, whose eyes shone with pride. Her research into pediatric gene therapy was gaining momentum, and now it would be fully funded. The board murmured, intrigued. "And we're changing our hiring practices," Camila added, stepping forward. "We'll be building talent pipelines from shelters, community colleges, and job training centers, because brilliance doesn't always come with a resume." Michael Chen, the once rival investor, nodded. "It's bold, and it's exactly what this company needs." Public opinion followed. Headlines shifted from scandal to redemption, from arranged marriage or fraud to power couple rewrites corporate legacy. At the annual press conference, a young woman named Sarah, once homeless, now a junior software engineer thanks to Camila's program, stood beside them. "When no one else would take a chance on me," she said into the microphone, "Mrs. Thorne did. She didn't just give me a job, she gave me back my future." Julian looked at his wife standing tall in a simple navy dress, no longer hiding anything. And he realized Camila didn't just change him, she changed everything around him. Later that night, walking hand in hand through the community center ribbon-cutting ceremony, Camila whispered, "This is the kind of legacy your mother would have been proud of." Julian smiled, eyes full. "No," he said, "this is the legacy we built. Together." They had started as strangers, bound by a contract neither truly believed in, but what began as survival became surrender, not to weakness, but to truth. Julian had once defined worth by wealth and love by appearance. Camila had once hidden her brilliance behind quiet clothes and quiet words. Both had worn masks, both had played roles, until one chose to test, and the other chose to grow. She was never just a plain bookworm. She was power in disguise, grace under fire, a mirror no one wanted to look into until she forced them to. And he was never beyond redemption, just too proud to ask for it. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was honest. built not on fantasy, but on forgiveness, not on beauty, but on belief, and not on power, but on partnership. In a world obsessed with surfaces, Camila Wright Thorne dared to be seen for who she truly was. And in doing so, she taught everyone watching that the deepest kind of love is the one that sees what others miss. The kind that says, you are not invisible, you are not too much, and you are not alone. If this story touched a part of you, if you've ever felt overlooked, unheard, or underestimated, don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Black Voices for more emotional and powerful Black stories that matter. Because your story matters, and we see you.